Everything begins with a breath. It is the most basic and unconscious act of human survival. From the moment you are born, you place your absolute trust in the invisible ocean of gas surrounding you. But what happens when that trust is weaponized? When did our ancestors first look at the air, the plants, the very ground itself, and realize they could turn nature into an invisible assassin? We often think of the history of human warfare as a story of physical strength and sharp edges. Spears, swords, arrows, and eventually bullets. We picture physical trauma. But there is a shadow history of human conflict, one that is far more terrifying because it entirely bypasses our physical strength. This is the story of the moment humanity stopped fighting with muscle and iron and started fighting with chemistry. To find the origins of this dark innovation, we have to look far beyond the trenches of the First World War, long before gas masks defined the modern nightmare of chemical warfare. We have to travel back into the distant past, to the dense jungles and vast savannas, where the first humans were still fighting to secure their place in the food chain. The very first chemical weapon was not a gas. It was a liquid, and it was not meant for humans at all. Imagine a prehistoric hunter tracking a massive prey animal. Even with a sharp stone spear in hand, taking down a beast 10 times your size was a life-or-death gamble. A spear might cause a wound, but a giant animal could run for miles. Or worse, turn around and crush the hunter. But what if the weapon didn't need to kill the prey through blood loss? What if it only needed to scratch the skin? At some point, tens of thousands of years ago, a human made a profound observation. They noticed that certain frogs, specific insects, or the sap of particular vines could kill a massive animal with just a single drop. They realized that nature had already perfected the art of silent killing. By smearing this natural toxin onto the tip of a wooden dart or a stone arrowhead, ancient people completely changed the mathematics of the hunt. You no longer needed overwhelming force. You only needed a scratch. This was a massive cognitive leap. It required an understanding of cause and effect that was entirely abstract. You cannot see a poison working. You cannot see it break a bone or pierce a heart. You simply watch the creature collapse from the inside. To the prehistoric mind, this must have felt like a kind of dark magic. You were borrowing the wrath of the earth itself. But a chilling question arises. Once humans realized they could use toxic sap and venom extracts to kill animals, how long did it take for them to turn those poisoned arrows against their own kind? Anthropology offers a surprising answer. For a very long time, there seemed to be a deep, almost universal taboo against using poison on other humans. In many ancient cultures, from tribal societies to early empires, poisoned weapons were viewed with absolute disgust. They were considered the tools of assassins, not warriors. Ancient Greek and Roman texts frequently condemned the use of poison in combat as a disgrace, a cowardly tactic that violated the sacred rules of war. War was supposed to be a test of courage, strength, and the favor of the gods. Poison bypassed all of that. It allowed the weakest individual to instantly equalize the greatest hero. So, what broke this taboo? When did the desperation of conflict override the ancient sense of honor? The shift occurred when human settlements evolved into fortified cities. When you fight on an open field, you can rely on swords and cavalry. But when your enemy hides behind stone walls that are dozens of feet high and incredibly thick, physical strength is no longer enough. Sieges were grueling, exhausting events that could last for years. Starvation and disease were the usual weapons. But eventually, military engineers started looking for faster, more ruthless ways to break the enemy. They stopped trying to break the walls and started trying to break the environment itself. This brings us to a forgotten outpost in the Syrian desert, an ancient Roman fortress city called Dura-Europos. The year is 256 AD. The Persian Sassanid Empire is marching across the desert, determined to wipe out the Roman presence in the region. The Persians laid siege to the massive walls of Dura-Europos, but the Roman defenders held their ground. What happened next was buried under the desert sands for nearly 2 millennia, until archaeologists in the 1930s uncovered a scene of absolute horror. The Persians knew they could not easily batter down the walls, so they began digging a massive tunnel right underneath them, aiming to collapse a defensive tower. The Romans, realizing what was happening, dug a counter-tunnel of their own, intending to intercept the Persians underground. The two tunnels met in the suffocating darkness beneath the earth. You might expect the archaeological record to show a brutal melee fight with swords and shields in that confined space. Instead, archaeologists found the bodies of 19 Roman soldiers piled on top of each other, their remains frozen in a state of sudden and agonizing death. Near them was a single Persian soldier, clutching his own armor. There were no slash wounds that could explain a massacre of that speed and scale in such a tight space. So, how did 19 elite Roman legionaries die all at once in a dark tunnel? The answer lay in the chemical residue found on the walls of the mine, traces of sulfur and bitumen. When the Persians heard the Romans breaking through the rock, they did not draw their swords. Instead, they brought down braziers filled with hot coals. They threw chunks of sulfur and bitumen into the flames. In the confined, unventilated space of the tunnel, this mixture ignited into a dense, highly toxic cloud of sulfur dioxide gas. With a bellows, or perhaps just the natural draft of the tunnel, they pushed this thick, acidic black smoke straight into the faces of the advancing Romans. This is the first physical evidence of chemical warfare in human history. Put yourself in the boots of those Roman soldiers. You are deep underground, moving through a cramped, pitch-black tunnel, listening to the enemy digging just feet away. Suddenly, the rock is breached. But instead of an enemy soldier, a wall of suffocating thick black smoke surges toward you. You take a breath, and instantly, the moisture in your lungs reacts with the sulfur dioxide to create sulfuric acid. You are literally burning from the inside out. Your eyes sear, your throat swells shut, and within seconds, your nervous system spirals into a state of panic. The 19 Roman soldiers never had a chance to fight. They suffocated, drowning in acid in the dark. The Persian soldier found nearby likely stayed too long to tend the deadly fire and fell victim to his own weapon. The Persians then collapsed the tunnel, sealing the horror underground, where it remained a silent testament to human ingenuity and cruelty for over 1,700 years. The event at Dura-Europos is a chilling proof of concept. It proved that you could use the atmosphere itself as a weapon, and once that door was opened, it could never be closed again. As centuries passed, the use of toxic smoke and chemical incendiaries evolved. The ancient Chinese developed bellows systems to pump poisonous smoke extracted from mustard plants and toxic minerals into enemy siege tunnels. The Byzantine Empire became famous for unleashing Greek fire, a terrifying liquid incendiary weapon that burned on water and could not be extinguished. While primarily a fire weapon, the thick, toxic smoke it produced acted as a chemical agent, blinding and suffocating sailors as their ships burned around them. But these ancient methods, terrifying as they were still localized. They depended on wind direction, terrain, and the immediate environment of a siege. It wasn't until the dawn of the industrial age that humanity truly mastered the calculus of mass chemical death. The leap from burning sulfur in a desert tunnel to the industrialized chemical warfare of the 20th century required a fundamental shift in how we understood the building blocks of nature. We had to move from simply burning what we found in the dirt to isolating and synthesizing the elements themselves. We mapped the periodic table. We built massive factories capable of producing chemical compounds by the ton. We stripped away the mystery of natural poisons and replaced it with cold, calculating engineering. When chlorine and mustard gas drifted across the battlefields of Europe in World War I, it was not a new idea. It was the exact same strategy of those Persian miners at Dura-Europos, magnified by modern industry and deployed on a horrifying global scale. Why does this matter now? Why should we look back at the poisoned arrows of prehistoric hunters or the sulfur smoke of an ancient siege? Because it reveals something profoundly deep about human psychology and our relationship with the natural world. The invention of chemical warfare was not just a military innovation. It was a psychological crossing of the Rubicon. When you shoot an arrow or swing a sword, you are targeting an individual. You are engaging in a physical contest. But when you unleash a toxic gas, you are targeting an entire environment. You are declaring war on the air itself. You are removing the human element from the act of killing, turning it into a silent, indiscriminate chemical reaction. It is the ultimate expression of control and the ultimate loss of empathy. It forces us to confront a deeply unsettling truth about our species. The exact same brilliant cognitive leaps that allowed us to understand the world, map the elements, create medicine, agriculture, and modern civilization are the exact same mechanisms that allow us to invent new and increasingly horrific ways to destroy one another. Intelligence is entirely neutral. It merely provides the tools. It does not dictate how they are used. The taboo that our ancient ancestors felt against poisoned weapons was not just primitive superstition. It was an intuitive understanding that there are boundaries which, once crossed, unravel the entire fabric of human restraint. They knew that if you weaponize the habitat, you make nowhere safe. Today, we live in a world governed by international treaties banning the use of chemical weapons. We look at gas masks and hazmat suits as symbols of a terror we have collectively agreed to leave behind. But the knowledge remains. The formulas are in our textbooks. The factories can always be rebuilt. That invisible weapon is always there, waiting in the shadows of our scientific achievements. The next time you take a deep breath of fresh air, consider just how fragile that invisible luxury truly is. Think about the thousands of years of history where that very air was turned into an enemy. We did not conquer nature. We simply learned how to convince it to do our darkest bidding. And the scariest part of this ancient story is not that we figured out how to make the air toxic. The scariest part is that, deep down in our evolutionary programming, we still carry the nature of the exact same creatures who lit the fire in that dark tunnel at Dura-Europos. Chemistry changed, but we did not.